Good morning. I'm Dee Perry, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event, which is the final installment in a series of Black History Month programs that have been highlighting the lives and the accomplishments of prominent African Americans whose final resting place is Lakeview Cemetery. We appreciate you being part of the program, whether you're here in the Westfield Westfield Theater, like our students and teachers from Facing History High School, yay, Shaker Heights High School, and Warrensville Heights Middle School. Thank you all for being here. We also have students and teachers watching the WVIZ live stream, and we welcome Jane Addams Business Career Center and East Cleveland's Shaw High School. I'd also like to take this time to thank our sponsors, especially the Tecovas Foundation, the Key Bank Foundation, and Dominion Energy Charitable Foundation. And I'd like to acknowledge the collaborating organizations that produced this series: the Lakeview Cemetery Foundation, Hiram College, WVIZ PBS Idea Stream, and the Cleveland History Center at Western Reserve Historical Society. Now, these sponsors and organizations are dedicated to diversity and the proposition that all men and women are created equal. Black history is an important part of American history and Cleveland's history, and by reliving and remembering the achievements of the four Clevelanders who've been part of this series, we come to understand the struggles and the challenges that African Americans overcame in this country. Their perseverance serves as an inspiration for all of us. We hope that you who are watching will pay close attention to the traits and innovative methods that these heroes portrayed, and many of their qualities, including hard work, integrity, and activism, are still vital ingredients of personal and professional success. We're all connected to the rich history of this nation, and by celebrating Black History Month, everyone can be included in a tradition of acknowledgement, inclusion, and community engagement, and thanks to you and our partners for making it possible to share this experience.
Welcome to IdeaStream's second annual Black History Month program. This year's program series is sponsored by the Lakeview Cemetery Foundation, the Tecovas Foundation, Dominion East Ohio Gas Company, and the Key Bank Foundation. Our program is originating from the Westfield studio at the Idea Center here in Playhouse Square. Dee Perry of IdeaStream will host and moderate each program. Professors from the Hiram College will be our guest presenters for each of the four programs, and our in-house audience will consist of students from the Cleveland Metropolitan School District and other Northeast Ohio districts. Other students across Northeast Ohio will participate in the program via a live stream. Special thank you to Judy Como-Hart, Mary Cromer, and Maisie Adams of the Lakeview Cemetery Foundation, and Linda Williams and John Ramacone of WVIZ IdeaStream Education Department for their behind-the-scenes work in creating this outstanding educational and community engagement opportunity. We hope you enjoyed today's program, and we look forward to you participating in the programs scheduled for each Wednesday throughout the month of February.
Hello, my name is Mark Druckenbrode, and I am president of the Lakeview Cemetery Foundation. We are very pleased to bring you this series of lectures on prominent African Americans buried at Lakeview Cemetery. These individuals contributed economically, culturally, and civically to Northeast Ohio, the nation, and the world. We are pleased to collaborate with Hiram College, the History Center at Western Reserve Historical Society, and WVIZ PBS IdeaStream. And special thanks to our sponsors, the Tecovas Foundation, Dominion Energy Charitable Foundation, and Key Bank Foundation. Black History Month has become an important part of Lakeview Cemetery's educational programming, in which we promote positive examples of historical events, exemplary leaders, and progress toward social change. This month is not only deeply meaningful for the African American community, but imperative for all of us to gain a better understanding of our nation and the world. By reliving and remembering Black history, we create awareness of the struggles and challenges that African Americans overcame in this country. Their perseverance serves as an inspiration for all. Every race is connected to the rich history of this nation, and by celebrating Black History Month, everyone can be included in a tradition of acknowledgement, inclusion, and community engagement. Thank you for your presence today.
Hello, my name is Judy Como Hart, Executive Director of the Lakeview Cemetery Foundation. On behalf of the Tecovas Foundation, I would like to read a statement from Trustee Alexander S. Taylor II, who could not be with us today but wanted to express the Foundation's support of this project. With great honor, the Tecovas Foundation is thrilled to be the lead sponsor of this great lecture series, profiling these extraordinary African Americans who greatly contributed to the civic, cultural, and economic life of Cleveland and the nation. In collaboration with the Lakeview Cemetery Foundation, Hiram College, the History Center, Western Reserve Historical Society, WVIZ PBS Idea Stream, the Key Bank Foundation, and the Dominion Energy Charitable Foundation, we believe in the importance and value of this project. Our foundation has deep roots in Cleveland, and we have always cared about the welfare of this city. We believe that people have the capacity to solve their own problems, but they often don't have access to the tools they need to make the change they seek. We are committed to helping organizations working on similar issues find each other, have productive dialogue, and work together to achieve their mutual goals. Therefore, we find value in the collaborative effort of this project to raise awareness of these magnificent African Americans who overcame many obstacles to achieve great goals in their lives. In doing so, we hope to teach you all about the promise of this country, that all men and women are created equal. We hope you are inspired by their stories. And moving forward in your own lives, we hope you realize all things are achievable through hard work, discipline, and perseverance. Thank you for allowing the Tecovas Foundation to be part of this great endeavor.
Good morning. I am Heather Clayton Terry, Philanthropy Coordinator for Dominion Energy. It is my privilege to join with Key Bank Foundation on presenting Lakeview Cemetery's Black History Month lecture series. This program provides a wonderful opportunity to recognize the achievements of some truly exceptional men and women as part of our celebration of Black History Month. These contributions are important regionally, nationally, and internationally. Dominion Energy Ohio sponsored this collaboration in order to provide a unique learning experience. Through this program, we look to raise awareness of outstanding leaders and to expose students to people whose lives were both rich and diverse. It is our hope that the hundreds of participating students pay close attention to the traits and innovative methods of these heroes. Many of their attributes, including hard work, vision, integrity, and determined spirit, are still vital ingredients of personal and professional success. Dominion Energy incorporates diversity and inclusion as a key component of our business as well, making decisions based off multiple perspectives and a range of ideas just makes sense. In fact, we host a number of employee resource groups, including an African American group, women's group, Latino group, and veterans group to celebrate workplace diversity and inclusion. We follow the guiding principles of respect, fairness, and consistency to ensure our work environment is one in which every team member is valued so that our corporate culture attracts, develops, and retains the best and brightest employees. We are a proud partner of this lecture series and look forward to continuing to serve our employees, customers, and students across the region. Thank you and enjoy today's program.
Hi, my name is Kim Manigault, and I am the Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer for Key Bank. On behalf of Key Bank and our thousands of Cleveland employees, thank you for joining us in sharing the rich history of Cleveland's notable African American leaders during Black History Month. These stories will inspire and make you think about our city and our shared culture and history. We are pleased to partner again this year with Lakeview Cemetery on this important program. Lakeview Cemetery is an historic landmark with deep roots in Cleveland's past and the extraordinary people who built this city. At Key Bank, diversity and inclusion is woven into our corporate fabric. It is reflected in our workforce, our workplace, and our marketplace. This project provides the opportunity for Key Bank to link arms across our community as we celebrate Black History Month. On behalf of my colleagues at Key Bank, I want to say we are honored to participate in this community effort as it reflects who we are as a company. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your Black History Month celebration.
And now we're going to hear about the first of two historic figures who are being featured on today's program. The man we start with was a newspaper publisher, a political power broker, and a community activist. Here to tell us more about the life of William O. Walker is Dr. Cathy Rodabaugh, an adjunct professor of history at Hiram College. Dr. Rodabaugh.
William Otis Walker, someone I did not know anything about, and decided was really a very exciting figure. William Otis Walker was born in the Deep South just before the dawn of the 20th century to parents who ran a grocery. After college in Ohio, he did a stint at the Pittsburgh Urban League, which quickly led to a job as staff reporter at the Pittsburgh Courier. This began one of the most noteworthy careers of any African-American journalist, civil rights proponent, or political activist in American history. Walker arrived in Cleveland by way of positions as editor at the Norfolk, Virginia Journal and Guide and the newly founded Washington Tribune. He came at the invitation of local business people desperate to revive a dying African-American weekly, the Cleveland Call and Post. Have any of you heard of or seen a copy of the Call and Post? Anyone? Yay! I called the number I found on a Google search and discovered it was still in operation and they're still going strong. It was 1932. America was deep in the Great Depression. Times were indeed quite hard. But under Walker's direction and later ownership, the paper struggled to prominence. Delivered around Cleveland by a team of so-called newsboys pictured here. Their boss, who everyone called W.O., was the opposite of the stereotypical brash, cigar-chomping newsman. Walker was quiet-spoken with kind, soft eyes. He dressed carefully in a conservative suit and smoked a pipe. Eventually, under his guidance, the Call and Post became one of the most prominent Black newspapers in the country, a must-read for those interested in the civil rights struggle of African Americans. The paper was published for many years out of a modest building shown here on 55th Street. Its name represented its origins from a merger of two other papers, named obviously the Call and the Post, hence the Call and Post. During the first 10 years, Walker gradually increased the paper's size from 4 to 12 pages and the circulation from 1,000 to 10. During his 50 years at the helm, the Call and Post increased its circulation to 40,000 with 3 editions. Some believed Walker, shown here reading his newspaper, may have achieved success partly due to the sensationalizing of violence on the front page. Can you make out the headlines here that read, "Black woman found hanging in Cleveland Heights jail"? And the other one, "Tell my wife I love her, Virgil Brown"? I don't know what that's about. Some people thought this was necessary, though, given that much of the paper's sales were impulse buys from store counters. However, no other paper could compete with Walker's Call and Post in coverage of news of interest to African American Clevelanders, be it religious, social, or regarding civil rights. Around this time, Walker was also a founding member of a Cleveland organization that promoted hiring of blacks by white-owned businesses, fair labor practices, and an increase in black business ownership. This image shows the member officers in 1938. The Future Outlook League differed from many similar organizations in that it promoted targeting offending businesses with pickets and boycotts. Their slogan was, "Don't buy where you can't work." Within a few years, the Future Outlook League boasted the support of many business persons, ministers, and other professionals. Walker used his newspaper to inform readers and support labor protests, including pickets against some of Cleveland's most prominent businesses. In recognition of the League's first president, the main post office building downtown was dedicated in 1988 as the John Hawley Building. Any of you familiar with that building? That was named after the first president of the Future Outlook League. From the late 1920s through the 30s, Cleveland swimming pools, such as the one shown in this slide, became the locus for racial conflict. Blacks attempting to swim in area pools and beaches experienced regular occurrences of collective white violence. In 1927, Woodland Hills Park opened a swimming pool, offering blessed relief from summer's swelter to area residents. You all have a favorite local swimming place, I'm assuming, for summer. Doesn't everybody want to cool off in the summer? Well, the black youths living in nearby areas wanted to use the Woodland Hills pool. Shortly after it opened, however, 5 black youths tangled there with a huge white mob. A black youth suffered a fractured skull, and a white boy was stabbed. Families from the nearby African American area of Mount Pleasant soon discovered that white hostility and police indifference accompanied attempts to enjoy a cooling swim. Black swimmers sometimes forcefully pressed their rights to swim in area waters. One father carried a stick to guarantee that his children swam uncontested. And an African American mother thrashed a white swimmer who threatened harm. In 1937, whites gathered around a handful of Jewish and black bathers at the Woodland Hills pool, chanting, "Get out, get out." Walker highlighted the ongoing problem in the Call and Post story. The headline read, "Negro bathers shun beautiful Woodland Hills pool." Why? When white bathers chased a young black family off the main beach at Gordon Park, Walker marshaled the paper again to demand that the mayor explain why the policeman on duty refused to offer assistance, and why he said to the woman, "You have no business in the water and should go where Negroes are permitted to swim." When newsboys at a Call and Post Woodland Hills Park picnic approached the pool, they were surrounded by about 50 whites who threw out racial slurs and threatened to drown them. A white policeman refused to intervene, and a black patrolman who soon arrived was harassed by the white antagonists. The melee turned violent, and police reinforcements arrived to arrest 6 of the bullies for assault. Tensions heightened. Pool staff began selectively applying so-called athlete's foot checks to discourage would-be black swimmers. When Cleveland's public safety director reassigned a black detective prominently working on this case, Walker raged. He is turning out to be just another punk insofar as Negroes are concerned. The case drew together a coalition of racial justice supporters who demanded the city enforce Black civil rights. They included, of course, Walker and his paper, neighborhood activists, ministers, conservatives and radicals, Blacks and whites. They overran the courtroom on day one of the trial and forced a postponement. Ultimately, the defendants were acquitted of assault charges by an all-white jury, whose members had claimed they could uphold the law even though they all admitted they would avoid a racially integrated pool. Walker and other supporters pressed their case. A mass meeting featured speeches by representatives from national civil rights, anti-violence, and racial justice organizations, as well as the Future Outlook League. The mayor himself attempted a conciliatory speech. Ultimately, the defendants pled guilty to much lesser charges. Walker's call and post reasoned this only a partial loss, predicting it will have great effect upon the few lawless youths who heretofore have created the trouble. Shortly after, W.O. successfully campaigned for a post as city councilman, which he held for 7 years. He used his weekly column to promote a sense of pride in the African American community. Walker encouraged Blacks to believe in their ability and not view race as a handicap. He was a staunch Republican, having been raised in a Deep South town that still associated the Republican Party with Abraham Lincoln. Consequently, throughout his life, he promoted the Republican beliefs in self-help and business as the true engines of economic growth. However, he always maintained that his primary loyalty was to African American progress and periodically allied himself with Democrats, communists, pacifists, conservative or radical, Black or white, did not matter if they shared the goal of Black advancement. During the 1940s and 50s, heavy in-migration of Black families from the South dramatically altered the racial makeup of Cleveland and strained housing supplies. Walker used his paper to protest discriminatory housing policy. In one instance, he angrily upbraided Cleveland's housing authority, writing that its operations were more like Hitler's dictatorship than democratic America. The Call and Post joined the Future Outlook League to protest the worst abuses, including seizure of Black-owned businesses for white neighborhood expansion, exorbitant rents, and housing code violations. Walker praised Black Clevelanders who bought homes in the solid areas of Glenville and Mount Pleasant, despite the refusal of banks to offer mortgages in those areas. He wrote, "Negroes, no different from any other people, want to live in decent homes in desirable neighborhoods." Changing neighborhood makeups prompted instances of racially motivated vandalism and violence in the early 1950s. A mansion chosen to become the home of a Black church was bombed. Other buildings or dwellings were vandalized. City Council, of which Walker was no longer a member, began to discuss writing an ordinance against big bombings. But clearly, Walker wanted more. In an angry editorial, he demanded that it was up to the mayor and his police department to make Cleveland too hot for those who are so prejudiced in their souls that they cannot live with their neighbors in peace and as brothers. Cleveland, he said, had a better history of racial cooperation than most large cities. He encouraged Clevelanders to maintain it by their leadership and example. The influx of African American families into outlying expansion neighborhoods spurred a good deal of interracial class and cultural conflict. Walker encouraged Black residents to maintain tidy residences, even calling out one family for hanging laundry on the front porch. Neighborhood groups and block clubs policed undesirable behaviors or practices. A pleased Walker claimed in 1951 that Glenville and Mount Pleasant were the show places for our people in Cleveland. He advised that for selfish reasons, then, everything should be done by homeowners to preserve and protect their investment. Walker admitted the main problem was overcrowding, but advised residents to mitigate its ill effects by observing parking laws, dressing decently when going to the store. I'm going to have to remember that one for myself. Maintaining lawns and houses, and keeping discarded items out of sight. Unfortunate trends in the following decade led to further decline in the livability of outlying residential areas formerly available to African Americans. Despite federal civil rights laws, lending discrimination continued, as did white hesitance to live alongside African Americans. There was an influx of poorer residents, forced out of central residential areas by increasing rents and urban renewal. The result was crowding and worsening living conditions. Walker joined those who lamented the sad developments in these older, formerly desirable neighborhoods. In 1964, he wrote, "The Glenville area in Cleveland at one time was the hope of Negroes who wanted a decent place in which to live. Today, Glenville is in the throes of becoming a slum ghetto." Tensions heightened nationwide during the 1960s as civil rights unrest escalated, resulting in violence and urban tensions. The nation was badly rocked by the 1968 assassinations of Martin Luther King and presidential candidate Robert Kennedy. Despite the heightened racial tensions of the 1960s, Clevelanders celebrated the success of some of their own African American leaders. In 1963, Walker was selected to become the first black cabinet member of any Ohio governor, when Governor Rhodes named him director of the Ohio Department of Industrial Relations. Despite Walker's being a conservative Republican, in 1967, he supported Democrat Carl Stokes for mayor. I assume most of you have heard of Carl Stokes, even at this age, right? Upon election, Stokes became the first African-American mayor of a major city. Walker willingly worked alongside just about anyone who also promoted African-American progress. He reportedly said once, "If it's ever a choice between friendship and race, I'll always support my race." The election of Stokes did not ease racial tensions in Cleveland, already one of the country's most racially divided cities. Instead, it inflamed them. Stokes had sought the support of Black Panthers and other militant organizations, making many white Clevelanders uneasy. In this environment of heightened racial tension, Walker helped to form another organization which aimed to support Black Clevelanders. The groups and people who coalesced to form what was later called Operation Black Unity included civil rights organizations, churches, ministers, and Black nationalists. Their goals were broad: promote fairness and excellence in employment, education, business ownership, housing, health and welfare rights, and legal treatment. The strength of this developing African American coalition was tested in 1968 when it promoted boycotts of McDonald's. Oops. There we go. Good thing I checked. Promoted boycotts of McDonald's for operating only white-owned restaurants on Cleveland's primarily Black East Side. David Hill, seen in this slide, speaking at an Operation Black Unity rally, was chairman of their negotiation committee. Hill, a pastor and founder of a militant Black nationalist group called House of Israel, was at the forefront of the protest. But Walker used his newspaper as the group's mouthpiece, supporting the boycott. Picketers refused to disband when ordered, and even became violent. They intimidated would-be diners by carrying nightsticks and wearing ammunition belts and even hurling rocks into restaurant windows. The McDonald's Corporation temporarily took control of the stores. McDonald's sent its veteran Black corporate manager, but even he was handed a revolver by one white policeman who advised him, "Shoot to kill." A regional manager claimed Hill threatened fires at the franchises if they were not sold to Blacks immediately. Hill could not have been more different from the quiet, conservative Walker. One writer offers this description of Hill and events surrounding the boycott. Sometime in the mid-60s, amidst all the civil rights protests in the United States, one David Hill formed the House of Israel in Cleveland, Ohio, where by then he already had a criminal record that started decades before. Well known in the Black community there as Bishop, Hill teamed up with the Reverend Ernest Hilliard, known locally as the radio personality Prophet Frank Thomas, and became very active in the local business sector of Cleveland. Shocked that whites owned most of these businesses, including McDonald's, they started the 1968 Black Unity campaign against McDonald's and convinced the locals to boycott the fast food giant, as well as supply the revenue to start the first Black-owned fast food enterprise. Locals signed off checks for $5,000 and signed franchise application forms. Some months later, Hilliard, aka Prophet Thomas, was found in his garage, shot in the head. Although Hill was questioned as a suspect, nothing came out of the investigation, and locals eventually discovered that the duo's plan was a scam. Oh, we have poltergeist here. Hill was found guilty for blackmail in the McDonald's boycott and sentenced to serve a 4 to 25-year term. One judge questioned Hill's mental soundness. For his part, Hill claimed, "White racists are trying to make me a scapegoat. They've banded together to try to stop the movement of Black control of Black communities." Hill was also found guilty of charges against him in Chicago, but managed to flee the country and live the remainder of his life in South America with a new group of followers. When a prominent Black community leader labeled the boycott a shakedown and the mayor offered to mediate, the protest gradually lost favor. Soon, Black franchisees were found to operate the McDonald's stores in majority African-American neighborhoods. W.O. Walker and his Call-in Post weathered both the McDonald's boycott and the turbulent 1960s. Remarkably, not even association with the militant and controversial Hill or other radical activists turned him from his dedication to political conservatism, unless it was in the specific cause of racial justice. Walker remained a loyal Republican supporter and leader throughout his life. This is not to say Walker did not urge the party to become more responsive to African American concerns. Far from it. In 1949, protesting any lack of mention of civil rights or African Americans in the state Republican committee policy, Walker complained, The Republican Party will have to take the pig out of the bag if they expect the Negro voters to even be interested in buying it. In 1964, when Walker realized only 1% of representatives at the Republican National Convention were African American, he complained the party had turned the convention into Lily Whiteism's greatest triumph. The next year, the National Republican Committee officially launched its Negro Advisory Council of nationally prominent black Republicans. The chair of the NAC was none other than W.O. Walker, publisher of the Call and Post, who also ran the Ohio Republican Council, a statewide organization for black Republicans. In 1968, Walker and other black Republicans responded favorably to presidential hopeful Richard Nixon and his rhetoric on black capitalism and economic development. He exulted, "Nixon will do more for African Americans than has been accomplished in the last 100 years. That didn't happen, by the way. However, by the time of the 1976 presidential campaign, Walker's enthusiasm for many in the party had dimmed. His fiercest criticism was aimed for the white conservative delegates that candidate Gerald Ford had courted throughout the convention. They are, wrote Walker, either Republicans who still live in the 19th century or are potential fascists who embody all the racism of Hitler. He didn't mince words. Black voters were turning away from the Republican Party in large numbers during this time, citing the party's lack of support for African Americans or concern for their economic well-being. Disgruntled black Republicans, including Walker, rejected President Ford. Walker refused to endorse him, maintaining that the party had pursued a pro-white Southern strategy. Ooh, touchy. At the 1980 National Republican Convention, candidate Ronald Reagan was smarter and courted the support of black Republicans, promising to include their ideas in his campaign. This approach worked. Moreover, Reagan, second from the right here, helped them entirely incorporate their urban policy plank into the campaign. Buoyed by these developments, Walker, who's sitting at the far right here in this slide, gladly accepted appointment to a position in the Reagan for President campaign. After his 1980 election, Walker joined Reagan at a meeting of black leaders in Washington, D.C., and that's the photo that you see before you. However, Walker soon became critical of Reagan when the new president did not appoint African Americans to prominent political positions in his administration. Before Walker's death later that year, Reagan was considering him to be the chairman of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. No other American had shown more dedication to African American progress and willingness to work with diverse people to accomplish it than William Walker of Cleveland's Call and Post. Walker's on the left in this image. Cleveland showed its appreciation of William Walker over the years. This image shows Walker receiving an award for contributions to the black community. Walker had also been the second president of the National Newspaper Publishers Association. This last image shows Walker symbolically laying the cornerstone at the YMCA building in Glenville, a neighborhood that, like so many others, where black families lived. Walker did much to promote, defend, and protect. He was so highly respected by Cleveland's black community that they sometimes referred to him as Godfather or the patriarch of the black community. Throughout his lifetime, he received numerous awards and community honors, such as this one, with special significance in representing his legacy of promoting African American progress in Cleveland. Leah Rigueur writes of Walker frequently in her recent book, The Loneliness of the Black Republican. To her, he represented the strategy African American Republicans needed to thrive in the 20th century U.S. To survive, they had to be flexible and pragmatic, adjusting to account for the reality of their lived experiences. Walker himself put it this way: I am perhaps more militant than most for the rights of Black people. Black Republicans realize that there are some reactionaries, some conservatives in the Republican Party. Our job is to convince them to be liberal on Black causes. Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. Rodabaugh. And now is the opportunity for you to step to the microphone and ask a question. And as John Ramacone mentioned, you mention your school and your first name as you ask your question. And while we're waiting for our first questioner, Doctor, I wanted to get a sense of how William O. Walker was perceived by other establishment papers or by the mainstream community, because he used his newspaper for a bully pulpit to promote causes that weren't generally popular in the white community. So did he get any pushback?
I have no idea. And I was afraid I'd get a question I had no idea about. I really don't know. In all of the reading I did about William Walker, I didn't run into anything that commented on that. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing because of the forward-thinking nature of many of his causes that he did not have an awful lot of white readership, or that the mainstream papers sort of brushed him aside. Mm. But that's an excellent question, Dee, and I'm not sure I'd know where to find the answer.
That means we can all do some more research.
Right, right.
And we have a questioner at the microphone.
Hi, my name is Brooklyn, and I'm from Shaker. And my question is, do you think Walker would have supported Obama as an African American being elected as president, or do you think he would have stayed with the Republican Party?
Oh my goodness, what an excellent question. Wow. Isn't that something to ponder? Would Walker have supported Obama, a Democrat, but an African American? Or would he have supported the Republican candidate? You know, I wish W.O. were here next to me so we could ask him what he thought. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I'll bet he'd vote for Obama. Mm-hmm. Because he did say, I have to choose my race over my friends. And I think at that point, he would have seen that as advancing the cause of Black progress so much that he would step outside his comfort zone of the Republican Party just that once, maybe. What a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Okay. I have another one for you. W.O. Walker was a Cleveland City Councilman. I missed what era he was on the council?
In the 40s. From about 41 to 47, he was a city councilman.
And and this is probably another guess, do you feel he was more effective as the publisher of the Call and Post or in city council? I mean, I can't imagine what he was able to get through during that time.
I'm thinking the Call and Post. City council does what it does, but I just don't think they are going to have access to the pulse of the people that they claim to serve the way his paper did.
Yeah, good. And your question, sir?
I'm Veron with Shaker Heights High School, and my question is, what do you think motivated Walker to step up and fight for change?
imagine like so many, his question, in case you didn't hear it, was what motivated Walker to fight for change. I'm guessing, like so many African Americans during the 20th century, it's just a lifetime of trampled rights and disrespect and mistreatment and lack of opportunity. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, my name is Rosemary Gramajo. I'm from Facing History New Tech. And I was wondering if William had like any family, like, you know, wife or kids. And if he did, like, does he have any family now that's alive that like keep on with his legacy, like with the paper and everything?
That's another excellent question. I told Dee earlier, I kept wanting to know that myself, wishing to understand a little more about the full picture of this man. I could find the names of 2 wives. He was married for about 30 years, married as a young man, but then divorced 30 years later, and then he remarried. I could find absolutely nothing about either one of those women. He had no children from either marriage. This is something we historians lament, is that the sources that are kept tend to be about people who were viewed as being important. We call that the Great White Man Archive fact, right? So if you're looking into women of a certain time period, and that, for instance, these wives, you often don't find much. And I was shocked at that in this age of the internet. I could find nothing, absolutely nothing. He had at the time of his death in 1981, he had a sister still living. That's the only relative I know of. And I don't know whether she had children or whether there are descendants from there. Maybe if I spend a little time on Ancestry, somebody might have traced some of that, but that's as much as I know.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Well, I think this will be our last question.
Okay.
My name is Devlin Moody. I'm from Shaker Heights, and my question is, if you were to be in this day and age, like probably like right now, what impact do you think he will have, like on like media and stuff like that? Since we're like in the age of like internet, and Instagram, Snapchat, and all that, how you think the impact would be today?
You know, I think WO would be right out there figuring out how people want to get their news. Because even though he took criticism for the sensationalizing of the headlines, what he recognized was there are a lot of people who are not consumers of news, sometimes by choice, but by chance. And if they were standing at the store getting their gallon of milk and saw that headline that caught their eye, kind of like when you stand at the grocery store checkout and you see the Inquirer and it tells you that somebody famous is really an alien from outer space, you know, don't you notice that? Now, he was a responsible journalist, don't get me wrong, but he recognized you have to catch people's interest. I think he'd be right out there pushing social media as a news source. He was not a flamboyant man, but he was a smart man about how to communicate with people.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
And also, the Call and Post does have an online presence, so
They do.
if you want to look them up, you can see the Call and Post on a website.
Absolutely.
All right. We're going to move on to our next presentation
Okay.
after a 5-minute break.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodabaugh.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.